Thanks a lot for your interest in my poster. My name is Alex Estudillo and I have done this work in collaboration with Annie Yortica. As you can see, the title of my poster is The Effect of Orientation and Familiarity on Detecting Thatcherized Faces. Research suggests that familiarity modulates face identification. For example, the identification of familiar faces is effortless and automatic, even under highly challenging conditions. On the other hand, the identification of unfamiliar faces is difficult and error-prone. Based on this dissociation between familiar and unfamiliar faces, some authors have proposed that these two types of faces are processed qualitatively different. In fact, according to some authors, familiar faces are processed more holistically compared to unfamiliar faces. However, there is limited experimental evidence. Two classical manipulations in face processing literature are inversion and Thatcherization. Inversion is assumed that disrupts holistic processing of faces. Interestingly, this change in the processing is not linear, but it happens at around 90 degrees. On the other hand, the Thatcher illusion reflects orientation-specific mechanism. For these reasons, we perceive a Thatcherized face when it is presented upright but not in inverted orientations. In the present study, we wanted to explore whether the processing of familiar and unfamiliar faces rely on similar cognitive mechanisms. If this is the case, one would expect that the effect of Thatcherization and vertical orientation should be similar across both types of faces. 96 participants took part in this study. They were presented with 30 familiar and 30 unfamiliar faces. These faces were also presented in different vertical orientations from 0 to 180 degrees in a step of 30 degrees. And the task was simply decide whether the face was normal or Thatcherized. The analysis of D prime revealed a strong drop in performance at approximately 120 degrees. And this drop in performance is similar for familiar and unfamiliar faces. Interestingly, we also found an overall better discrimination for unfamiliar faces. We also combined reaction times and accuracy to calculate the rate correct score. For normal faces, we found a relatively linear drop in performance, and this drop in performance was similar for familiar and unfamiliar faces. In Thatcherized faces, we found a sharp drop in performance at 120 degrees, and we also saw that there was a better performance for familiar faces from 120 degrees onwards. The similar drop in performance for familiar and unfamiliar faces as the faces were rotated suggests similar use of holistic processing. On the other hand, the better performance for unfamiliar faces, especially from 120 degrees onwards, suggests enhanced featural processing for unfamiliar faces.